The house stood silent in the bustling Tokyo neighborhood of Setagaya, December 30th, 2000, while most families in this lively, densely populated area prepared for New Year's celebrations. The Miyazawa home had become something else entirely, a crime scene so brutal and methodical that it would haunt investigators for decades. Inside, 4 bodies lay where they had fallen: a father, a mother, their young daughter, and their 6-year-old son. But this wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. The killer had stayed in the house for hours after the murders, eating ice cream from their freezer, using their computer, sleeping in their living room. What makes this behavior even more shocking is that this wasn't some isolated location. Setagaya is a bustling, densely populated neighborhood, teeming with families and activity even today. The killer's brazen decision to linger for hours in such a busy area speaks to an almost unimaginable level of confidence and callousness. What kind of mind plans such calculated violence against an innocent family? What intent drives someone to not just kill, but to make themselves at home in the aftermath of their own brutality? In the children's bedroom, investigators would find something that would haunt them forever. Evidence of a terrified child's final moments. A little boy who never had a chance to escape his own bedroom. The killer had murdered 6-year-old Ray first, strangling him as he slept, then systematically hunted down the rest of his family. This is the story of intent at its most evil. Intent that planned, calculated, and executed not just murder, but the complete violation of everything that makes us feel safe in our own homes. Welcome to Deadly Intent, the podcast that examines the psychology behind the crime. I'm Carmen Carrion, and today we're diving into one of Japan's most perplexing unsolved cases, the Setagaya family murders. Intent. It's what separates accident from murder, passion from premeditation, justice from revenge. As the legal scholar Oliver Wendell Holmes once wrote, it is not the act itself, but the intent behind it that makes it a crime. The murders we're examining today demonstrate intent in its most chilling form, not just the intent to kill, but the intent to violate every boundary of human decency. This is the story of a crime so methodical, so deeply disturbing in its execution, that it continues to baffle investigators more than 2 decades later. But this case forces us to examine darker questions about criminal psychology. When does planning become obsession? When does violence become ritual? And what happens when a killer's intent extends beyond murder to include psychological terrorism of an entire community? On December 30th, 2000, 44-year-old Mikio Miyazawa should have been looking forward to the new millennium's first New Year celebration with his family. Instead, he became one of 4 victims in what would become one of Japan's most notorious unsolved murders. But before we delve into the horror that unfolded in that house, we need to understand who these people were. The Miyazawa family wasn't just statistics in a police file. They were real people with hopes, dreams, and futures that were brutally stolen from them. Miko Miyazawa, 44, worked from home for Interbrand, a prestigious London-based marketing firm that had helped create globally recognized brands, including coining the term Wi-Fi. Those who knew him described a gentleman, creative and devoted to his family. He had a particular passion for animation, puppets, and theatrical plays, often attending performances at the Shiki Theater Company with his family. Mikio's work allowed him the flexibility to be an involved father, and he took full advantage of that opportunity. Friends remember him as someone who chose his words carefully, thoughtful in conversation, the kind of father who would spend hours helping his children with their homework, or patiently explaining how things worked when they asked endless questions. His home office was equipped with the latest technology, and he took pride in his ability to work effectively from home while still being present for his family. According to those who knew him, Mikio was passionate about the arts and had interests that extended beyond his marketing career. His love of theatrical performances at the Shiki Theater Company reflected a creative spirit that colleagues and friends recognized and appreciated. His wife Yasuko was 41 years old and worked as a teacher, running a cram school from their home while managing their household. She had given up a full-time teaching position at a traditional school when Nina was born, but she stayed connected to education through her tutoring work, which she genuinely enjoyed. Students and parents alike respected her patient teaching style and her ability to make complex subjects accessible to young minds. Yasuko had a reputation in the neighborhood for her kindness, always ready with a smile for the local shopkeepers, always willing to help other parents during school events. The type of person who remembered everyone's birthday and showed up with homemade treats. She took pride in maintaining their home, a modest house that they had worked hard to afford in the upscale Setagaya district. She was particularly passionate about education and child development. According to family members, her commitment to teaching extended beyond just her own children. She genuinely cared about helping young minds succeed and was known for her patient, nurturing approach to education. Their daughter Nina was just 8 years old, a second grader with bright eyes and an infectious laugh. According to those who knew her, she was actively involved in soccer and ballet and had recently started learning piano. She was excited about performing in the school's upcoming recital. Her teacher would later tell investigators that Nina was particularly gifted and showed remarkable artistic ability, much like her father's creative talents. According to those who knew her, Nina was one of those children who seemed to excel at everything she tried. Her room was filled with art projects that showed remarkable skill for her age, and she was known for reading books above her grade level. She had her father's artistic eye and her mother's intellectual curiosity, making friends easily and often helping her classmates with their studies. She had been looking forward to the new millennium, having learned about the significance of the year 2000 in her social studies class. According to family accounts, she had expressed dreams of becoming either an artist like her father or a teacher like her mother, aspirations that reflected the loving influence of both parents on her young mind. And then there was 6-year-old Ray, the baby of the family. Ray was everything you'd expect from a kindergartner, energetic, curious, full of questions about the world around him. However, he had been struggling with a speech impairment, which had become a source of worry for the family. They had recently begun seeking professional help to address this concern. Despite this challenge, Ray loved trains with a passion his father encouraged by taking him to watch the bullet trains at Tokyo Station every weekend. His bedroom was filled with toy trains, model sets, and picture books about locomotives from around the world. Ray had an extraordinary memory for train schedules and could tell you exactly when specific trains would arrive at various platforms. His teachers were amazed by his ability to absorb and retain complex information, and they suspected he might have exceptional intellectual gifts. He could draw detailed train diagrams from memory and loved to explain to anyone who would listen the differences between various types of engines. His dream was to become a train conductor, and he would often play elaborate games where he would conduct imaginary passengers around the house, complete with ticket checks and announcements about upcoming stops. His parents found these games charming and educational, encouraging his interests and planning to take him on a special train trip for his 7th birthday. This was a family that represented everything good about suburban life. They lived in a duplex home. What appeared from the outside to be a single house was actually 2 connected units. Yasuko's mother, sister, and brother-in-law lived in the adjoining side, so close they could have been mistaken for a single household. The families had agreed to soundproof both sides for privacy, a detail that would later prove crucial to understanding how the killer remained unheard during his attack. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. They weren't famous, but they were loved by their community. They had no known enemies, no dark secrets, no reason to fear for their lives. They were simply good people living a good life, which makes what happened to them all the more inexplicable and tragic. The timeline of the murders begins on the evening of December 30th. The family had spent a quiet day at home, Mikio working on some projects for Interbrand, while Yasuko prepared lessons for her students. The children played in their rooms, the house filled with the normal sounds of family life. Ray making train sounds as he played with his models, Nina practicing piano scales. At 10:38 p.m., Mikio accessed his work email using his password-protected account, the last confirmed time he was seen alive. Around the same time, a witness walking past reported hearing what sounded like a family argument, coming from the direction of the Miyazawa house, though this may have been unrelated to the later events. Neighbors would later tell police that everything seemed perfectly normal that evening. Lights were on throughout the house, and they could hear the family's usual evening routine. There was no indication of trouble, no signs of distress, no reason for concern. Sometime between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, an intruder entered their home, beginning a sequence of events that would shock Japan and remain unsolved for more than 2 decades. The method of entry tells us something crucial about the perpetrator's intent. This wasn't a spontaneous break-in. The killer entered through a second-floor bathroom window, a difficult and risky entry point that required planning and physical capability. The window was accessible only by climbing over a fence and possibly using an air conditioning unit, then removing the window screen. This entry method demonstrates several key aspects of the killer's psychological profile. First, it shows advanced planning and familiarity with the property layout. Second, it requires physical fitness and agility, suggesting a younger perpetrator. Most important, choosing this difficult entry point over easier ground floor access demonstrates what criminal psychologists call an organized offender, someone who plans methodically and thinks through consequences. Let's pause here to examine what this entry method tells us about criminal intent. In criminal psychology, we distinguish between different types of offenders based on their behavior patterns. An opportunistic killer might break in through a ground floor window or an unlocked door, something quick and easy. A disorganized killer might enter impulsively, leaving evidence of confusion and panic in their wake. These types of crimes are often solved quickly because their perpetrator makes mistakes, leaves obvious evidence, or acts in ways that make them easy to identify and catch. But our Setagaya killer chose the most difficult entry point possible. This suggests someone whose intent extends far beyond the immediate act of murder. Organized offenders are much more dangerous because they're harder to catch, but they're also more likely to kill again because their crimes are driven by deep-seated psychological needs rather than circumstantial factors. The choice to enter through the second-floor bathroom window wasn't just about access. It was about control. It demonstrated a level of preparation that speaks to deep, methodical intent. Once inside, the killer moved with deadly purpose through the house. The evidence suggests that he went directly to 6-year-old Ray's bedroom, where he found the boy sleeping peacefully among his beloved toy trains. In what may have been the most cowardly act of this entire horrific crime, the killer strangled Ray with his bare hands, killing him through asphyxiation while he slept. This choice to kill Ray first reveals crucial information about the killer's psychological state and intent. Murdering the youngest, most vulnerable family member first wasn't a strategic decision to eliminate witnesses. It was something far more disturbing. It suggests a perpetrator who either took satisfaction in killing the most innocent victim, or who was following some twisted internal logic that we may never understand. The attack on Ray was silent but brutal. The 6-year-old never had a chance to wake up, to cry out, or to alert his family to the danger that had entered their home. He died surrounded by the toy trains he loved, in the bedroom where he felt safest, killed by someone whose intent was so evil that he could murder a sleeping child without hesitation. At some point after Ray's murder, Mikio became aware of the intruder's presence. Whether he heard sounds of struggle or simply sensed something wrong, he moved to investigate. The evidence suggests he encountered the killer and fought desperately, suffering defensive wounds on his hands and arms as he tried to protect himself and his family. But Mikio was overpowered and stabbed multiple times with a sashimi knife that the killer had brought with him, a 4-inch blade designed for slicing raw fish, not for durability under the stress of repeated stabbing. During the attack on Mikio, the knife's tip broke off and became lodged in his skull, forcing the killer to abandon his primary weapon. The defensive wounds on Mikio's hands tell a heartbreaking story of a father's final moments. He fought desperately, trying to grab the knife, trying to shield himself, trying to buy time for his family to escape or hide. His injuries show he battled for several minutes before succumbing, demonstrating the courage of a father trying to protect his loved ones, even against overwhelming odds. Mikio was found at the bottom of the staircase near the front door, suggesting he may have been trying to reach a phone to call for help, or possibly attempting to confront the killer to prevent him from reaching the rest of the family. His final act was one of protection and courage, even in the face of unimaginable terror. With his primary weapon broken, the killer retrieved a santoku knife from the family's kitchen, a general-purpose kitchen knife that was much more durable than his original weapon. He then systematically hunted down the remaining family members. Yasuko was found in the children's area of the house, where she had likely gone upon hearing sounds of struggle, desperately trying to locate and protect her children. The evidence suggests she had tried to shield Nina with her own body, the final act of a mother's love. She suffered multiple stab wounds, concentrated in her back and side, indicating she was trying to cover her daughter when she was attacked. 8-year-old Nina was found near her mother, and the evidence suggests the most heartbreaking chase imaginable. Blood evidence shows she had tried to run, moving through different rooms of the house, desperately seeking escape or help that would never come. The killer had pursued her through her own home, hunting a terrified child through rooms that should have been her sanctuary. Here's where the case takes on its most disturbing dimensions, and where we must examine the killer's psychological state and intent. The physical evidence shows that this wasn't just murder, it was overkill. Mikio, Yasuko, and Nina were each stabbed multiple times, far beyond what would be necessary to cause death. In criminal psychology, overkill typically indicates one of two things: extreme emotional involvement with the victims, or a deep-seated psychological disturbance that drives the perpetrator to continue attacking even after their victims are clearly deceased. Given that the Miyazawa family had no known enemies, the emotional involvement theory seems unlikely. This suggests we're dealing with someone whose intent was not just to kill, but to dominate, to control, to express some deep-seated rage that went far beyond whatever motivated the initial attack. The pattern of wounds suggests what forensic psychologists call expressive violence, violence that serves to express the killer's internal psychological state, rather than simply accomplish the goal of murder. This type of violence often indicates severe personality disorders, particularly antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy. The variation in how he killed each victim is also telling. Ray was strangled, a personal, intimate method that requires close physical contact. The others were stabbed repeatedly with knives. This suggests someone who was experimenting with different methods of killing, possibly deriving different types of satisfaction from each approach. What happened next sets this case apart from virtually every other multiple homicide in criminal history. After brutally murdering 4 innocent people, the killer didn't flee. Instead, he stayed in the house for hours, possibly until dawn, treating their home as his personal sanctuary. The evidence of his extended stay has been carefully documented by forensic investigators. He ate ice cream from their freezer, 4 different containers, consuming them slowly and methodically. He used their computer for exactly 5 minutes and 18 seconds at 1:18 a.m., visiting the Shiki Theater Company website, which was bookmarked by Mikio. He even attempted to purchase theater tickets using the family's credit cards, though the transaction was unsuccessful. He helped himself to food from their refrigerator, drank barley tea, and used their toilet. Though he did flush, small marks of feces remained on the bowl that investigators were able to sample. This waste contained traces of sesame seeds and string beans, leading some investigators to theorize he lived with someone who prepared traditional meals for him, possibly his mother. Most disturbing of all, he apparently took a nap on their living room floor, using their blankets as if he were a welcomed guest, rather than their murderer. He spread the family's personal documents across tables and furniture, possibly searching for financial information, or simply satisfying his curiosity about their private lives. This behavior demands serious psychological analysis because it reveals layers of intent that go beyond simple murder. The killer's decision to stay in the house for hours shows either supreme confidence in his ability to avoid detection or a complete disconnect from normal self-preservation instincts. His comfort level in the space suggests possible prior surveillance or familiarity with the family's routines. The casual way he consumed their food and used their belongings indicates complete dehumanization of his victims. To this killer, the Miyazawa family have become objects rather than people. Perhaps most chilling is the ritualistic nature of his behavior. The neat consumption of ice cream, the brief but purposeful computer use, the methodical spreading of documents, all suggest someone following an internal script or satisfying specific psychological needs through these actions. The fact that he attempted to purchase theater tickets using their credit cards suggests either a bizarre attempt to insert himself into their planned activities, or simply an experimental desire to see if he could successfully use their financial information. Either way, it demonstrates a level of psychological detachment that borders on the incomprehensible. Despite his extended stay, or perhaps because of it, the killer left behind more physical evidence than investigators typically find at most crime scenes. Over 12,545 pieces of evidence were collected, making this one of the most evidence-rich cases in criminal history. The DNA evidence tells us our perpetrator is of mixed ethnicity. Analysis of his Y chromosome reveals genetic sequences present in 20 to 25% of Korean people, but fewer than 10% of Japanese and Chinese people. Mitochondrial DNA analysis suggests his maternal line traces to Southern Europe, possibly the Mediterranean region. The clothing he left behind was equally revealing. He abandoned a complete outfit, including items that were relatively rare in Japan at the time. A raglan sleeve shirt that had only 130 units sold in Tokyo, of which police have been able to locate only 12 buyers. Shoes manufactured in South Korea, but not sold in Japan, featuring a size marking system used only in Korea. Perhaps most intriguing was the hip bag he left behind, which contained sand traced to the Nevada desert, specifically the area around Edwards Air Force Base in California. This evidence has led to theories about possible U.S. military connections, though no definitive links have been established. However, local residents and some investigators believe the killer was ethnically South Korean, with connections to the U.S. Air Force, possibly the dependent son of a USAF member who was attending school at the nearby Yokota Air Base. This theory suggests he may have left Japan immediately after the murders through unconventional means, potentially flying out from a military base that allowed him to escape detection by local authorities. The bag also contained skateboard grip tape and traces of Drakkar Noir cologne, the same fragrance found on 2 black handkerchiefs he left behind. One handkerchief had been folded into a triangle and used as a mask, while the other had a cut in the center and was wrapped around one of the knives, a technique similar to methods used in fish processing or certain military training. 26 years later, investigators still struggle to understand the motive behind these murders. The lack of clear motive is still revealing about the killer's psychological state and intent, suggesting someone whose motivations come from internal psychological factors rather than external circumstances. The military connection theory. The evidence of sand from Edwards Air Force Base combined with the killer's apparent physical fitness and tactical approach, has led some to speculate about a perpetrator with military training or connections to U.S. bases in Japan. The mixed ethnicity DNA would fit someone with connections to the American military presence, where interracial relationships were more common than in Japanese society generally. The random violence theory. Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that this was essentially random, that the Miyazawa family was chosen simply because they were accessible and vulnerable. This would suggest a killer whose intent was simply to kill, with the specific victims being less important than the act itself. The personal grudge theory. Some investigators have theorized about connections to disputes over land development in the area, or conflicts with local skateboarders who use the nearby park. However, extensive investigation has revealed no substantive evidence supporting these theories. Importantly, contrary to some speculation, the Miyazawa family had actually agreed to sell their property as part of the local development plans, dispelling theories about them being targeted for refusing to sell. The Setagaya murders became a national obsession in Japan, partly because they challenged fundamental assumptions about safety in one of the world's most peaceful societies. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police assembled one of the largest investigation teams in Japanese history, involving close to 280,000 investigators over the years and following up on countless tips from the public. The investigation revealed just how methodically the killer had planned this crime. Evidence suggests he may have surveilled the family for some time before the attack. On December 25th, Yasuko had mentioned to her father-in-law that a strange car had been repeatedly parked in front of their house, despite there being no parking restrictions in the area. But despite the massive investigative effort and unprecedented amount of physical evidence, the killer has never been identified. This fact tells us something important about his level of planning and criminal sophistication. Based on the evidence and behavioral analysis, criminal profilers have developed a likely description of our perpetrator. Male, aged 15 to 24 at the time of the crimes, with investigators leaning toward the younger end of this range due to evidence suggesting a student lifestyle. Physically fit and agile, of mixed Asian and European heritage, likely familiar with the Setagaya area. Critically, highlighter pen ink found in his abandoned hip bag suggests he was actively involved in schoolwork or studying. The organized nature of the crime suggests above-average intelligence, while the post-crime behavior indicates possible antisocial personality disorder or psychopathic tendencies. The variation in killing methods and the overkill aspects suggest deep-seated psychological disturbance. Most significantly, this is likely not his first or last violent crime. The level of organization, the comfort with extreme violence, and the complete lack of empathy demonstrated all suggest someone with a history of antisocial behavior. Beyond the immediate intent to murder, there's evidence of a secondary intent: to terrorize and traumatize the community. The killer's decision to stay in the house, to leave behind such detailed evidence of his presence, seems calculated to maximize the psychological impact of his crimes. Consider the message sent by eating their ice cream, using their computer, sleeping in their living room. This wasn't just murder. It was a violation of every concept of sanctuary and safety that a home represents. The killer wasn't just destroying lives. He was destroying the very concept of security for anyone who learned the details of his crimes. As we examine this case more than 2 decades later, we're forced to confront uncomfortable truths about criminal intent and justice. The killer's obvious intent was not just to murder this family, but to get away with it. And in that terrible goal, he has succeeded. The extended stay in the house now seems even more calculating in hindsight. Perhaps he was intentionally leaving evidence, not to be caught, but to torment investigators. Perhaps the DNA, the fingerprints, the detailed behavioral evidence was all part of a game to him, a way of demonstrating his superiority over law enforcement. What kind of psychological profile emerges from this evidence? We're looking at someone with several distinct psychological characteristics. Extreme antisocial behavior, The complete lack of empathy for his victims, demonstrated by his comfort in their home after murdering them, indicates severe antisocial personality disorder. Possible psychopathy. The combination of planning, violence, and post-crime behavior suggests psychopathic traits. The ability to plan and execute extreme violence while maintaining emotional detachment. Control issues. Every aspect of this crime was about control. Controlling the victims, controlling the crime scene, controlling the narrative that would follow. The killer's intent wasn't just murderous, it was psychological. He wanted to demonstrate his power, not just over life and death, but over an entire community's sense of safety and security. Even today, the investigation continues. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police maintain a task force dedicated solely to this case. DNA evidence is periodically retested using advancing technology. New tips are still investigated. New leads still pursued. The case remains active because the intent to find justice remains as strong today as it was in 2000. In December 2024, victim advocacy groups submitted requests for new DNA legislation that could help solve cases like this one. Before we conclude, we must return to the reason this case matters, not because of its psychological complexity or investigative challenges, but because of the 4 innocent lives that were stolen. Mikio Miyazawa never got to see the new millennium unfold, never got to walk his daughter down the aisle, never got to teach his son about the business world he navigated so successfully. His final act was trying to protect his family from an unimaginable evil. Yasuko never got to see her children grow up, never got to expand her tutoring center, never got to become the grandmother she would have been. She died trying to shield her daughter from harm. Nina never got to play piano in that spring recital, never got to discover what she might have become with her remarkable gifts for mathematics and art, never got to experience any of the milestones every 8-year-old should have ahead of them. And little Ray never got to grow up to become the train conductor he dreamed of being, never got to take that special train trip planned for his 7th birthday, never got to experience the world beyond his loving family's home. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the toy trains he loved, never knowing the evil that had entered his sanctuary. These weren't just victims of violence. They were human beings whose lives had value, whose futures held promise, whose love for each other was genuine and deep. The killer's intent may have been to reduce them to objects, but we must remember them as the people they truly were. The Setagaya family murders force us to confront the darkest possibilities of human intent. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This wasn't someone who snapped under pressure or made a terrible mistake in a moment of weakness. This was someone whose intent was pure evil, not just to kill, but to violate every boundary of human decency in the process. Someone whose planning and execution demonstrated a level of malice that challenges our understanding of criminal psychology. The killer's intent was successful in the short term. He murdered 4 innocent people and escaped justice. He terrorized a community and challenged law enforcement. He turned a family safe haven into a crime scene that continues to haunt investigators decades later. But intent can be defeated by persistence, by the refusal to give up, by the determination to find truth and justice, no matter how long it takes. Somewhere out there, the Setagaya killer believes he has won, but as long as investigators continue to search, as long as the case remains active, as long as people remember and care about what happened to the Miyazawa family, his ultimate intent, to escape all consequences for his actions, remains unfulfilled. The intent behind the Setagaya murders was to destroy not just 4 lives, but the very concept of safety and security that families depend on. The killer succeeded in taking those lives, but he failed in his broader goal. The Miyazawa family is remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. As loving parents, innocent children, and valued members of their community. Their killer remains free, but he has not won. Every day that investigators continue to search for him, every time someone refuses to let this case fade into obscurity, every time we remember Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei as human beings rather than statistics, we defeat a portion of his intent. Remember, every killer has a reason, but does reason ever justify murder? In the case of the Setagaya murders, whatever reason drove this killer to commit such horrific acts, it can never justify the destruction of 4 innocent lives or the terrorizing of an entire community. Justice may be delayed, but it need not be denied forever. The intent to find truth and justice never expires. I'm Carmen Carrion, and this has been Deadly Intent.